This is the weekly finance meeting of the Commissioners today, March 22, 2023. Appointed hour 1:30 p.m. has arrived. We open the meeting and begin with a period of public comment for any individuals who wish to address the board on non-agenda items. Nothing. Okay, we'll move on to item 3. We have the minutes in hand of our meeting of March 15. Does this require action?
Move to approve the minutes of March 15th.
A second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, brings us to our topic of discussion for today. All topics. The first one listed is Kelly on bail?
Yes, she is on.
Okay. We have Kelly Smith, president of the Commission for Cumberland County Commission for Women, is with us today remotely to provide a quarterly update for the organization. So Kelly, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. Hello, my name is Kelly Smith. I'm the current chair of the Cumberland County Commission for Women. I'm going to provide an update on the commission from the end of the year 2022 through current. We currently have 17 members. Our bylaws allot for a maximum of 25 members. 4 new members were voted in at the October meeting, so we are almost at our maximum of 25. At the end of 2022, the commission partnered with the Peyton Walker Foundation, which is a women-owned and operated nonprofit organization based out of Camp Hill, which aims to spread awareness on sudden cardiac arrest and the need for life-saving measures. We called our initiative Giving the Gift of Life because it occurred around Christmas time. We did a Facebook Live interview with the foundation discussing why AEDs and proper use are so important. The foundation's creator, she lost her daughter to sudden cardiac arrest because an AED was not available. The commission sponsored an AED to be placed in a location in need in the county. We're going to work with the foundation on the placement of it. Unfortunately, due to supply chain issues, the AED has not arrived yet. We are hopeful that it's going to arrive in the first half of the year, but it's out of our control. We've been in constant contact with the foundation for updates. So we're hopeful sometime this spring. And again, like I said, we are going to work with them to make sure it's in a place that aligns with our mission. We are also hoping to build on our work with them and offer a hands-on training course, because how amazing would it be that we as a group of women can offer this to the county. One of our members is a registered nurse, and she has shared how overwhelming AED usage can be for so many people, despite how simple and easy to use they're designed to be. It's still overwhelming. So we're honored that we can potentially save a life here in the county because of this outreach initiative. So we're really, really excited for that. Additionally, we have an online panel discussion for Sexual Assault Awareness Month slated for Tuesday, April 11th at 6 o'clock. This is going to be broadcast live on our CCCW Facebook page. The panelists include McCormack, Lynn Christen, she is the director of UPMC Children's Advocacy Center of Central PA, Angie Long, who's with the Carlisle YWCA. There's also going to be 2 sexual assault survivors speaking about their story, which is really impactful and really powerful. And it's going to be hosted by Flora Posturero and Carrie Perry from Chick to Chick Broadcasting. Last year, we hosted a Facebook Live event for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and over 700 people tuned in. So we are marketing this event as a part 2 of that domestic violence awareness, sexual assault conversation. So we are really hopeful that we're going to achieve the same level of success with this one. Recently, I reached out to Annie Strite to inquire if CCCW can work with the county on their expanded mental health outreach. I saw the article on CBS 21 about the town hall meetings and the stakeholder groups. And I know Annie from CIT training, and she was really happy to allow CCCW to be part of the stakeholder group and to attend town hall meetings. So I'm really excited for this partnership and how CCCW can play a role in these conversations. So those are 3 upcoming programs that we currently have in the works right now. Looking beyond this first quarter of the year, we're working on a summertime lunch and learn series on how to connect women with resources and navigate legal systems such as custody, childcare, PFAs. Legal matters can be really overwhelming and scary, and we want to offer bite-sized information segments so women know how to connect with the resources that they need. We are currently exploring avenues to see if continuing education credits can be offered for attendance for, say, social workers or others in the field. Behind the scenes, the leadership, we're working on our strategic plan and reviewing our bylaws. Our organization is a professional organization, therefore we need to conduct business as such. So ensuring these documents are reviewed each year is really important for the credibility and the overall function of our commission. We've been working on our social media page and ensuring that we're staying current and posting all of our events and outreach on our social media page. Our next meeting is slated for April 13th. We have at least one interested member who's going to be joining us on that meeting. So we're hopeful that our membership is going to increase even further. So that's an overview of where we are at from the end of 2022 to through current through the first half for the first quarter of this year. Do you have any questions for me? And would you like any more clarification on any of the programs that I talked about or any of the initiatives that are in the works?
I have no questions, but could we get a current roster of members?
Yeah,
Or is that-
I can. Yep,
Okay.
I can send that over.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the update, Kelly. That was excellent. Glad to hear that the group will be working with Amy Strite.
Yes, I'm really excited for that. I think it's really good conversations, and I think it's a really good fit for our mission and our commission. Well, there are no questions. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being
Thanks,
here.
Kelly.
Okay, moves us on to second discussion item, which is the potential MH budget deficit that's we're discussing for Cumberland and Perry. And Annie's with us again today.
Yeah, thank you.
You're going to give us an update, I guess.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide an update for the last 2 weeks. And as you can tell, segue from Kelly, we've had some nice media outreach as a function of Samantha. So thank you to Samantha for her work here. We've had a number of organizations reach out and say, hey, can we help in any way? Please let us know. So that's been very helpful. I think Samantha told me that we had 9 media hits. So out of the articles and the television media, and then the following Monday after the finance meeting, I actually met with Scott Lamar from WITF for the Spark. And the person that I didn't realize was also going to join me was Lisa Schaefer from the County Commissioners Association. So she and I together did the Spark meeting with Scott Lamar. I was pleased with that as well. And then along with that, we had a legislator from a different district reach out and asked to perhaps learn more about our efforts. He had read the Penn Live article, and so we're going to be reaching out. I have reached out. I haven't received anything back from him as yet. So I was pleased about that as well. Just trying to get the word out. We've been working really closely with the communications team to pull together all of the information to get into the community. The flyer's been all but completed for the upcoming town hall meeting, Monday, April the 3rd, 6 to 7:30 at the Lower Island Township Building. We're working on a panel presentation for that. So myself and Megan Johnston, our children's person, will be joining us on the panel, as well as a family member of a son with mental illness, 2 individuals in recovery from mental illness, as well as a law enforcement officer from Lower Island Township, and a Mechanicsburg School District staff member. So I'm really pleased with the outreach, as well as then the willingness from the community to say, yeah, we're happy to support you with this. Of course, we've been working on meeting with the delegation. That's Wednesday, the 29th. So that's coming up next week. We also convened our meeting, the stakeholder meeting with the budget, to specifically go over our budget. And I was really intentional about asking people who had either used county funded services as a person in recovery, some of our larger providers who understand the workings of the county and how those dollars are expended, our staff internally, as well as our advocacy organization. So that way we had a balanced team to review the budget. And I'm going to say it was one of the most difficult meetings I've done in quite some time, because we've already made cuts back in 2011 and 2012. And there's really very, very little we can cut and not hurt our community. And that's really been the message. Is there anything we can do and not hurt someone in the process? And I'm very concerned about the implications. Other factors, the public health emergency is ending May the 11th. We received a report from the Office of Income Maintenance that we believe there will be about, of those who are current recipients of Medicaid, we believe there will be about an 18% reduction of that. Of course, many of those, or some of those individuals may be employed now, may have their own health insurance, and they won't need medical assistance, nor will they need county funding. There's going to be a smaller subsection of that group that would likely need county funded mental health services, even if it's 10% of that 18%. That's still a significant potential increase of utilization for county funded mental health services, which is a concern for our office. And we, internally have discussed if we made cuts to preventative services like student assistance or our CAS program, the likely increase will be felt by juvenile probation, by children and youth, as well as, ethically and morally, is that the right thing to do? And if we cut our residential services, and just as a reminder, we spend probably 70% of our mental health budget on residential services for adults with serious mental illness. If we cut those programs, then the impact will be likely felt by increased homelessness in our community, arrests, as well as inpatient utilization. And we know that we've had individuals wait for days in the emergency departments waiting for psychiatric treatment. So we're trying desperately to figure out if there are areas where we can cut and not have that ripple effect that we've been talking about. And we're struggling. And if we must do that, we will do that. But we all will be well aware that there will be a negative impact on our community. That's why I so appreciate the outreach. I so appreciate the community's response with ensuring that our legislators understand what's happening in their communities right now. And is there something that can be done to help fix it? It's been a long-term problem. It's probably going to require a long-term solution. How do we start to work on it?
I have to say, I've heard some comments from naysayers that say because it's been characterized as a long-term problem that, well, you may do so far. And they don't understand the idea of the potential for a tipping point at which the consequences are much more severe. So I think that's important to keep in mind, that a long-term solution doesn't necessarily mean kicking the solutions down the road for the long term.
Right.
So
I would agree with that.
We are at that.
As busy and stressful as the last couple of weeks have been, just walking through the budget review and meeting with the press and some of the stuff that I typically do. Saturday, there were 2 suicides. One in Cumberland County, one in Perry County. Like, we must do something. We must.
So let me ask this, because while everyone's hopeful about the potential for increased base funding that's in the proposed budget, it is just that, a proposed budget. And there's a long, arduous path toward getting to a final budget and a lot of negotiation. And nobody can guess what that, I think even leadership in both houses, which will be the ones leading point on that, don't know what that looks like yet. We'll probably have some initial thoughts, but nobody's in a position to predict success, failure, or something in between. So there was something said, maybe I'm bringing this up prematurely, but there was something said about our contracts to ensure a continuation of service in the event that there would not be a budget solution reached in a timely manner.
Yes.
Can you expand on that for me?
Well, that's actually the things that we mentioned that briefly at the last finance meeting that I attended. our contracts currently have a 60-day clause where if we're not going to contract for a particular service, we must give our provider 60 days notice. So that puts us in that sort of April timeline. And that I wanted to make sure that we at least brought that up today as a reminder to the Board of Commissioners that probably I should come back next week and have that conversation, and so we can be prepared to make a decision if you decide to have us make those cuts now, and if we have additional resources provided for this upcoming fiscal year, it may be possible that we would make cuts and then need to restore services that we have in essence cut. I left out one part. Last Friday, I met with new Deputy Secretary Jen Smith. And one of the things that we brought up was that funding formula that we talked about at the last finance meeting, how that needed to be reevaluated. And she agreed. And she said that they were going to be looking at the funding mechanisms and I guess update it. We don't know what that means for Cumberland or Perry counties. So if we make cuts, maybe prematurely, we may need to reinstate services that we cut. If you, the Board of Commissioners, decide not to make those cuts now, then it will have an impact on the general fund to continue to provide those services until we know definitively what our allocation is going to look like. And so it's a double-edged sword, and I wanted to be sure we were discussing that.
So would we be talking about doing, say, a 60-day extension of those contracts, or are we talking about something more ambitious than that? Or?
Well, I think from my perspective, it makes sense to maybe wait until the budget is enacted, so we would know specifically what our allocations look like. We're going to have to really encourage or make sure the state will give us that. There have been years that it's taken months to get our allocation.
I guess that's what I'm getting at, is because you're going to be looking for a commitment from us that's going to be meaningfully impactful, materially impactful to the bottom line for us. And we have to make that well in advance of when a decision is made by Harrisburg on what to do. So that's not a small impact. Of course, we were fortunate in the past because of our financial standing that when the state could not arrive at a budget for many months, that we were able to draw on, the hard-earned reserves of the county to sustain services for a while, and it ended up being a long while. But essentially, what we're proposing would be the same thing.
Possibly. Again, with the new administration, my hope is that there's leadership in place that are going to be determined to make sure that counties have a knowledge of what they're going to be working with. Because I think there are many counties in very similar situations as ours, where they're running right at that tipping point of running a deficit. I heard there was at least one other county that has a deficit similar to ours. So there are other counties that are feeling this negative impact.
Thanks.
Please let me know if you need additional information. Anything I can provide that helps.
So Annie, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking us for a 60-day backstop.
I think so. I mean, and again, you, the Board of Commissioners, have a strong awareness of what the county general fund looks like, what is doable, what isn't doable, and therefore then can make that decision.
I think I'd like two things, Anne.
Okay.
But right off the top of my head, three things. The first one is at CCAP over the weekend and on Monday, there was a lot of conversation about this particular issue. One of the things Jen mentioned is that there was some hope that the federal government would have some money for mental health. Have you heard a word about that?
Only from Jen.
Okay, because that's
conversation
I
with
have
her
not
last week.
seen or heard anything else. So I just wondered about that. So I'd like to know a 60-day backstop. What does that what is that dollar amount? And then I'd like to know, I don't need it down to the penny either.
Yeah.
I just need
to do that.
And then I'd like to know, because you can cancel contracts, but like you said, Annie, it's gonna cost you somewhere else. So what's it gonna cost us to not cancel them? Right? What is it gonna cost us to spend the money to not cancel them? And can we do an analysis of what it would cost to cancel them? What is the cost of the ripple effect?
And then there's even more to this. Last week, I received a call from an inpatient provider in another part of the state telling me that they were discharging a person from another part of the state to our community. And they wanted us to help assist that person to get supports. And I started questioning that. Does the person have family here? Is there connections here? And I think the short version was there was a homeless shelter that was willing to accept that individual. So along with that ripple effect, if there are communities that are less equipped to be able to manage this issue, it's likely that soon other parts of the state will see what's happening here and the good support that's available here. And then because we're working hard to try to meet the need, then people from outside see that. Not that that's, I certainly want to be supportive, but I wanted everybody to be aware that that ripple effect comes from other places too.
I lost my train of thought, Annie. It'll come back here in a second. No. Here's the other question. This is just a thought about this. So, some of these issues that we're having in the county started in the 80s, right? And the can has just been kicked down the road since the 80s, and it hasn't been addressed. And counties just keep jumping in and going, it's okay, we're going to fix it. We're going to make it okay for our populations. And so the legislature always looks like they're assisting when they're not. Like when we come in and save the day, what does that really mean? It's another reason why I'd like to have those numbers. What does it really mean if we come in and save the day? Yeah, and I know I'm asking for a lot, and I'm asking for some things that I don't think are measurable at this point in time. But I would like to know what will it cost? Yeah. Especially, and then I think about what we would do, if the governor's budget is passed in the way he's explained it, or if it gets better, what does that mean for us? And if it isn't passed in the way he's explained it, and if it's worse, what does that mean for us? There's a lot to consider here. A lot.
I think that's one of the reasons why this decision is so challenging.
Yes.
And even back in 2010, one of our advocates, we remember this from 2010, actually said sometimes you need to make those cuts. Make sure there's attention on the issue.
Which is a shame, isn't it?
What our struggle is how that negatively impacts people's lives.
Yes. That's a very expensive proposition in more ways than one, right? Morally, ethically, financially.
Right.
Right.
And not only the ripple effect on people's lives who are receiving services, but our staff members.
Yep.
One of those suicides impacted staff, because they're navigating that and the stress and truthfully the trauma.
Your comments actually bring up something I was going to address before, which was in the previous situation where the state did not have a budget. Part of the justification for the county stepping in, not only in the fact that because of fiscal prudence, we had the ability to step in, but stepping in that manner was a temporary backstop in which it was virtually assured, I believe, that we were going to be reimbursed for those expenses, at least up through the period that for the period that we expended. So if we're going to talk about something such as a 60-day backstop, our problem is that we don't know that money's coming back to us. So we don't know what the downstream effect is on us if we just end up making cuts further out because no money was restored. So a 60-day backstop is a nice concept, but it doesn't solve the problem. And we don't, as a state, we don't know the true cost because a lot of the true cost potentially would be, as we stated last time, is you don't just turn this off and then wait for the budget to be passed and then turn it back on. doesn't operate that way. So there's, if you try it that way, you simply amplify the true bottom line on the cost. So I'm interested too in seeing what we're looking at bottom line if there's a backstop. But I want us also to understand that that's not quite the simple solution that it maybe is portrayed to be because of downstream effects. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Andy, just a question. In the governor's proposed budget, he's proposing an increase of funding of 60 something.
20 million.
20
million.
statewide.
Statewide.
Correct.
What's off on that?
That's what he said, but in one of his statements, he made a comment about full funding, but the line item is 20, right?
Okay, that's the
You meant FOOL, I guess. Didn't add up.
And going by, I guess, what the current formula is, if it is 20 million, what would our share be?
I wish I knew.
You don't know, okay.
We don't know what that formula is.
No,
I
fair
asked
enough.
about that last year.
Okay. We've been hearing about that formula for a long time, so I'm not holding it.
Vince, did Behavioral Health Services Committee, and I'm certain that I mentioned this and then I emailed it, but I think it's good for the public to know this. The thought was that 20 million would make up for inflation from 13 years ago, from 13 years of flat funding. That's all it's going to do. It's just going to cover inflation for those years. It's not adding, right? It's not really adding to the base at all.
Yeah.
I mean, Annie, I'm sure that you heard this, and I mentioned this morning too. I mean, one of the things that was talked about at CCAP was the importance of making sure that our legislators know how dire this is, how important this is, and really getting FaceTime with them and squeaking, making the wheels squeak so that they understand just how bad this is. So, yeah, I mean, we're well on our way to doing that, and other counties are looking at using what we're doing, to assist in theirs.
We're also exploring possible other funding mechanisms, maybe for the children's services. We've approached children and youth since they have a needs-based budget. Could they support part of that? We're also reaching out to schools since it seems the governor's budget is focused on mental health, but in schools, would the schools help offset that expense? And all of those things are being explored, but it's all just conceptual at this point.
So in terms of this being a statewide issue of significance, acknowledged by the governor, where are we in terms of collective power, which presumably means CCAP? Do we know what their active action plan is?
There's a lot of efforts being put forth. In fact, I had a meeting literally just bumping up to this one to talk about those efforts and advocacy efforts on behalf of PACA, the Association of County Mental Health Administrators. So they're working on that. They have hired a lobbyist, someone who can do a little more outreach. So
You mean a contract lobbyist? They've gone outside the.
He's supposed to be working basically to increase contact with the media, similar to what Samantha is working on here as well, to make sure that there's a lot of people in the community that are aware of the issue,
right.
And then, working to outreach to legislators to tell them how important this is.
I guess one of the complications will be that just as we are looking for an increase in our portion of the formula, there are plenty of counties that would likewise want to lobby against a change in the formula because it will be an increase for them. So does CCAP expressed any ideas on how they don't get caught in the middle of these two forces?
I have not.
We have
heard
not.
that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, any additional questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you for the update. This long and got the good work. Okay, moves us on to item 3. We have the ongoing discussion regarding the gun violence investigation prosecution grant award contract. So that was tabled at the last meeting. So to continue discussion on that needs to be essentially untabled. So I guess that's the action we're looking for.
I will move to take discussion and approval of the gun violence investigation and prosecution grant award and contract for the district attorney's office FID off the table.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that'll bring us down to the discussion point on the issue. The Gun Violence Investigation Prosecution Act award. We did have considerable discussion before, some exchanges of information, requests for information. And I guess that brings us to the continuation of the discussion. So, the District Attorney, Sean McCormack, Mr. Radnovich. So I guess we'll let you present first and then pose our questions.
Sure. Thank you again for continuing this discussion. I hope to, based upon the conversation that we had last week and some of the questions that were sent seeking additional information to answer some of the lingering questions that you may have concerning our grant. There was a large portion of the discussion about the need for this, and there was some discussion about whether, what if we find out 2 years, 3 years from now, we really don't need this grant, or we really don't need this firearm section. And I think some of the statistics that we were able to gather, one of the first things we did was we pulled from our database the number of crimes that we have prosecuted over the past 5 years that involved firearms. The cases that involve homicides and stuff get a lot of attention, but as I indicated last week, one of the big problems I believe we have is firearms that are found during traffic stops or other law enforcement citizen interactions that wind up being taken in evidence, and then they're never tested. They're never sent for, and the primary reason for that is just because of the backlog that takes place at the state. The statistics I'm talking about are ones that say firearms charges. If you look at those, jumping down to the middle, persons not to possess, that's where a person is in possession of a firearm at the time that the police encounter them, and they are someone with a prior record. That is, they are someone that is not allowed under the law to possess a firearm. You can see that the numbers have increased over the years, from 32 in 2018 through now in 2022, 76 times we filed that charge. 51 times. I was looking at the wrong line. 51 times we filed that charge last year, and this year we've already, and these are cases that reach the district attorney's office. So not every time these charges are charged do they wind up reaching our level, but the ones that have reached our level thus far this year are 8. Carrying a firearm without a license, that could be either in a vehicle, carrying a weapon that's concealed. Again, we went from 32 in 2018 to 76 in 2022. Those are all firearms. I would state that the majority of those firearms were not sent to a lab. I also gathered, as part of preparation for today, I sent out an email to the different police departments asking them what their support is for this grant, and really asking for a commitment by them that when they have firearms that they would send them to us. And a lot of the letters that we have forwarded to you Those departments have not only answered that, but have emphatically indicated that they are willing to submit those firearms. I note in an email that I received, I'm not sure if I forwarded this one or not. I think I may have this morning from the chief of police of the Camp Hill Police Department, where he indicated today's criminals are mobile and determined. They use firearms in the commission of their crimes more than ever before. The enhanced capability of the Cumberland County Forensic Lab to possess and analyze firearms, bullets, and casings collected from crime scenes will lead to greater success in getting dangerous criminals off the streets in our county. Make no mistake about it, there are dangerous and violent people in Cumberland County who have no compunction about the possession and use of guns. The Carlisle Police Chief sent a letter, and I think it's one of the points, he makes one of the points that factually that I was making last week about this NIBIN system that we're seeking to have in place. Because we're not just talking about firearm analysis, we're talking about the shell casings that are being found. They indicated that the Carlisle Police Department could also submit shell casings for comparison and entry into the NIBIN system. NIBIN is a national database of shell casings that matches the shell casings from other gun violent incidents. NIBIN was able to match shell casings from the Hodge homicide in 2017 to several shootings scenes in Harrisburg City. The Carlisle Police Department was able to recover the murder weapon that was used in the Hodge homicide because of the NIBIN match and additional investigative work. That is a weapon that was used multiple times, including a homicide here in Cumberland County. And that ability of the police to be able to take that weapon off the streets so that they can't harm anyone else directly came from the ability to be able to enter something into NIBIN. Some of the other crimes, and it's hard to tell sometimes when you look at crimes, which ones are firearm related, which ones aren't. So what we did was we pulled aggravated assault cases with a deadly weapon. The majority of the time when we're talking about a deadly weapon, we're talking about a firearm. You can see some of the numbers of those. More often, the police encounter a firearm when we're talking about a simple assault. The crime of simple assault by physical menace is where you are doing something physically to make a person think that they are either going to be killed or seriously injured. The most common example of this is someone pointing a handgun at another person. And you can see those numbers there. There are some large number of cases that we have of those situations here in Cumberland County over the past 5 years. Not all of those firearms, even if they've been pointed at someone, are firearms that have been checked out. We could have in our evidence rooms in Cumberland County Police Departments firearms that have been used in homicides, but we just don't know it because we haven't done that extra step. I also included the statistics from our lab. These are the cases where our lab has been sent out to process particular crime scenes, and you have a listing, and we updated that today to include the rest of 2022 and what we've done so far in 2023. 78 handguns from 2018 to 2023 have been collected by our forensics lab. This is not including the handguns that are collected by the local police departments. 195 shell casings have been collected from various scenes over that same time period. I can tell you that those shell casings that have been collected, I think a very small, if any of those were ever entered into the NIBIN system, because the NIBIN system is not one that is as readily available as some other things that we use in law enforcement. And you can see some of the types of scenes on the far right of that chart, the types of scenes that we frequently are called out to. I spoke with the Pennsylvania State Police. I got some information from the Carlisle Barracks. They currently have 94 handguns in their possession and 60 long guns. And they indicate the vast majority of their handguns and long guns have never been sent to a lab, even their own lab, because of the situation that the lab has. There was a question about the cost associated with testing weapons. Now, I believe from what I've been able to find out, we have 17 firearms that have been processed or in the process of being processed by an outside ballistics lab. The lab we use is in New Jersey. We currently have 16 firearms that we're waiting to send out. A full reconstruction analysis, which is typically what we use in homicides, roughly costs $5,000. A partial reconstruction is about $3,500, and an operability analysis and that's where we have to prove, when we have to prove, like, for example, someone has possession of a handgun, we have to prove that the handgun is actually operable. And that is anywhere from $800 to $1,000. Additional costs, because there was a question, how do we get the handguns there? When we take handguns there, we send 2 persons per our protocols to Freehold, New Jersey. So you've got the cost of 2 people from our lab driving down there and driving back, and then doing a return trip when we have to pick up those guns.
Well, why is it 2? Why do you send 2?
Anytime you're transporting the evidence and those sorts of things, it's a check and balance to make sure nothing is being done with that firearm. Nothing is being keeping the chain of custody. It's the preferred way to do it.
Sean, the information you have here on this document, reconstruction part, what period of time does that encompass?
How long does it take to do it, or what period of time?
Statistics for what period of time?
That would be an Eric question. I believe that the 3 on there is the 3 firearms that we're talking about. Is that correct, Eric?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the
The
commission.
question is, we're full reconstruction analysis and the 5,000 that of the firearms that we've sent. What time period are we talking about? Is that the question?
Is this the last month, the last year, 6 months?
This has been in the last few months.
What is the actual cost of the 2 people traveling to Freehold?
It would be two salaries for the. I mean, 2 salaries for the day. I did not figure out the actual cost.
Sean, what does it cost to send a firearm to the PCP lab?
I haven't looked. So do you know, Eric, what they charge? And they don't do all the same services that we're asking to have done on some of these firearms.
You're asking about the PSP lab?
Yeah.
Yes, they don't. They do not charge.
Okay, so they don't charge anything, but there's a lengthy wait.
There's a lengthy wait that could be upwards of 14 months now, but the PSP does forward some of their costs through us into the costs of prosecution, which we wind up collecting. For jewelry costs, there was a question about jewelry costs. Some of the information I got concerning jewelry costs in January, the total, not every case that we use, but the total to bring jurors in during that term was $8,357.96. Typically, a case involving a firearm tends to last about 2 days. Now, typically, we don't have a case that only has a firearms charge. They're usually involving some other charges as well. But the breakdown for that is about $555.48. Jurors are not paid a lot of money. They're paid $9 a day for the first 3 days, and then after the third day, they're paid $25 a day. They get 17.017 cents a mile. There's a lot of factors that go into whether a case goes to trial or not, because there was a question posed about, well, because you had an expert, how many cases were worked out because you had an expert there? I don't think that question is that simple to answer. There's so many factors that go into whether someone's going to plead guilty or not. I can tell you that the one case I tried last year where we did bring the firearms expert in, we attempted in every way possible to work that case out. But the defendant did not want to go to jail for the rest of his life and wanted a trial. Received his trial and ultimately was sentenced by the jury to death. I will say that during the course of the trial, the fact that we had a firearms expert involved in the trial forced that particular defendant to concede during the course of the trial that the second firearm that was used to kill the second woman involved in that case was the murder weapon. Without that analysis, the defendant's initial approach to that portion of the case was, it wasn't me, I wasn't there, and the gun that was found on me didn't do it. But because we had that analysis, we were able to block that portion of his defense. And ultimately, as the trial was going on, his attorney in the middle of our expert testifying conceded that this was in fact the murder weapon. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. And there's a lot of different ways that experts and the firearm analysis of the way that we present cases. So it isn't always a guilty plea versus a trial. The majority of our cases still do work out as guilty pleas. The majority of our cases are disposed through some type of plea. The reason why the cases plead typically is based upon the strength of the case. If a case is stronger, there's more likely that it's going to plead. It's just common sense. It's rare when we have a really rock solid case that someone's willing to take a jury trial. When we don't take particular steps, when we don't follow all the different protocols that we should follow, those are the cases that we are missing something. And because we're missing something, because there's some weakness in the case, those are the cases where a defendant makes a decision that they are going to take a jury trial. Having these analysis, being able to perhaps link a firearm to another crime that is unsolved, would not only solve potentially two cases, but would also make those cases together stronger and increase the possibility that those cases would be jury trials. So there's so many different ways that can be factored in when we look at how this is going to affect our ability. The one thing with the letters of support that I saw from the police and that the police mentioned and have said to me individually in preparation today, this is a public safety issue. This is a public safety issue. This is a tool that we desperately need here in Cumberland County, one that will put us ahead of other counties in our ability to prevent crime here. And one that will allow us to have those stronger cases that I was just talking about. There was a question that was asked last week concerning the specifics for the space that we're looking at. What I've been told is that currently 3,096 square feet is about that is what's underneath that roof. The firearms lab, 670 feet would be allocated for the range that we're talking about, and 670 feet would be for the lab space. There's another 300 feet that would be used for a common area for a hallway. So that would leave the county still with 1,450 square feet of space. So as I indicated, I tried to answer a number of questions that I thought were still lingering last week. I'll answer any additional questions you may have at this time.
On
Sean,
this document that you sent us, I'm looking for our big populous municipalities. Like, I don't see East Pennsboro on here listed except once. Hampton's only listed a couple of times. Why is that?
Some municipalities don't always call us out to every crime scene. They always call us out to the most serious crime scenes that they have. Some municipalities have their own forensics people that may do some of the processing. They're certainly not of the same level of the people that we send out. I don't mean to undercut them, but the training that they have, the abilities that our lab has as compared to what they may have. I will note that the first letter of support I received was from East Pennsboro Township. I also received a letter of support from Silver Spring Township from Chief Robinstein, who's also the head of the Chiefs of Police Association, indicating the association's support for this lab. I have certain things as district attorney that I want to accomplish, and a greater use of our forensics is something that I want to continue to push and have been pushing since I took office last year. I find when our lab is involved with the processing of crime scenes, our ability to present things a particular way in the courtroom that's going to be successful for us is increased and multiplied because of that.
Okay,
Sean.
now, some of these, go ahead, I'm sorry, Eric.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, actually, I wanted to ask your question more completely. You asked when we started using this laboratory in New Jersey, and I didn't give you a great answer. I want to give you a better answer. We started using the laboratory in New Jersey. That number you're looking at for the 17 weapons is that was since July of 2020, August of 2020. The double homicide in Carlisle, that's when we began to use that laboratory. So that's a submission since then.
Okay. Now,
I apologize. I didn't have that right in front of me.
No,
So
it's okay. I appreciate that. The East Pennsboro letter, I also see in the lower Allen that they will commit to submit all these seized firearms to Cumberland County lab after its operation. Do we have numbers for that? As to what would we expect? So they're apparently sending them somewhere.
Well, I don't think they're sending them anywhere right now.
There's mention of the delay. State police.
Eric, do you still have some of those numbers? They were the numbers we were collecting earlier from some of the different police departments as to how many firearms they had in evidence.
I don't. Let me see if I have East Pennsboro here. Let's take me a second. Hang on one second.
East Pennsboro is one of the departments that is dealing with an increase in certain types of violence and seeing more handguns, both because you have the interstate and because of its proximity to the city of Harrisburg.
is surprised they're not on here more frequently.
Yeah, and as I recall, when we were out there, that was for homicide.
Yeah, here's North Middleton letter. We currently have 2 requests for firearm analysis. The State Police Laboratory have been filed for some time now. So it sounds like if you read these letters, that they would send them our way if we had a lab.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I was asking when I sent them an email after last week's meeting was, can I, because I said to you, I believe these departments are going to send these, and I wanted to have something in writing from them backing up that statement.
Yeah. The upper Allen sentencing.
And just to be clear, those municipalities have no cost involved at all. That's borne by the prosecutorial process, and potentially some of it would go to court costs.
That's correct.
But the
Yeah.
municipalities have no obligation, no financial obligation.
Correct. Correct. Now, something Eric and I have been discussing, and what we discussed before was us, if we are to test firearms and casings and those sorts of things from other counties outside of Cumberland County, what would we charge? We would certainly charge something. What the right price point is something we still have to figure out. But that is something that we would be willing to do. And I can tell you, even this week, I don't want to get into the details of the case because it's active, and it did involve firearms, but a department in Dauphin County reached out to our lab to do certain work for them. And one of the things that Eric and I were discussing was, they're using our lab. If we do it here, we're charging the defendant. What are we charging the other? So we're looking to do that not just with the firearms, but as other departments and counties seek to use our services, we should be getting something for that. And our intention is to do that.
Do we have any type of projection? I mean, what we have is a request to staff up to a degree, which it creates a certain amount of capacity, but we don't have a handle other than guesswork on what capacities needed, how much activity there's going to be for those folks. That's why, I tend to look for something at least akin to a business plan, a projection. We're going to handle this many, this year, and it's going to cost us this, etc. And I don't have the previous information in front of me, but we do have a firm cost on what the staff up is going to cost. Do we not?
Yes.
Yeah.
5 year.
5. It's a 5. Okay.
It was 4 years because the first, I think 14 months were
Covered with the grant.
covered by the grant. So, year 2 was 152,657. And that's worst case scenario if we're not able to get ATF to either pick up, put someone there to run the NIBIN, or the alternative was we were looking potentially to have them, was it maintenance costs of the NIBIN? Was that it?
Purchase and maintain it. They've worked different deals for different counties, so I'll have to see what they're going to do for us.
So we have certain contingencies that we're working on to try to even mitigate those numbers down a little bit.
This is 2 people, right?
2 people. One would be the technician to run the NIBIN, and one would be the firearms expert, the person actually checking the firearms.
So back, and you probably said this, and I was moving into your comments, but the number of firearms that we test and that are linked to other crimes, how many is that, or what? Do we have any?
I don't have a solid number on that.
Okay. Those weapons, you mentioned earlier about those weapons are off the street, but they're already off the street because we're.
Well, the one that I mentioned in particular was what Carlisle put in their letter was they recovered the homicide weapon for a murder that they had here in Carlisle. They were able to identify where that weapon was based upon shell casings that had been fired in the city of Harrisburg. So through that NIBIN system that I'm trying to get here, they were able to find out where that weapon had been used, and then through additional police work, were able to identify who had that weapon and then seize that weapon. And again, getting that weapon off the street, but also having the murder weapon that we could present in trial.
Sean, today, if I heard right, if the firearm is sent to the state police, there's no charge to the municipality.
That's correct.
Okay. But the reason they don't do it is because it takes so long.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, now
Yes. Now the state police also have, and I have some of their protocols. And one of the things I mentioned last time, for example, they have certain things that they don't want.
Right.
One of them being like if it's a suicide or attempted suicide. And I use the example of the case I had where, and in fact, even the one from December, it was initially stated that this was a suicide, when in fact it wasn't. So, you know, there are certain things, and they have to do that. They do that with other evidence also. There are certain things that they will not test at the lab under certain circumstances because they take things from 67 counties. They really are. They're a great lab. They're a top-notch lab. It's a great asset to the state, but they can only do so much.
So that leads me to a question of, you know, at what point does the state get the message that they need to upgrade their capabilities because of all this demand? And are we, if we're at our expense going out and contracting with some Jersey, or we decide to invest property tax money into a lab, are we not simply taking the pressure off of them to get their act together, quite frankly? So.
Well, I from my perspective, I would rather invest in our county for the safety of our citizens over trying to send a message to the Pennsylvania State Police. I certainly am active with the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, and the District Attorneys Association does a lot of lobbying with the state legislatively and those sorts of things. And we're always looking for things that are going to improve things statewide. But my focus right now is on Cumberland County.
And we do have one of the most advanced capabilities in the Commonwealth.
We do, yes.
And Sean, you would consider charging municipalities for this service?
Our municipalities? No, I'm not considering doing that.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is that because the defendant would be charged?
Yes, those costs we hope to assign to the defendant.
Got it. Thanks, Stacy.
In every case in which there's a test, or just in ones where
Every case where we're able to get a conviction.
where we're able to get a conviction?
Where we're able to get a
Okay.
Yeah.
Next.
And there were some of the numbers that I had last time, just as some of the collections, court costs collections. Over the years, we've, I think 2022, we collected $263,998 $1,000. Some other years in 2019, before the pandemic, we were around $337,000 in court costs, and that's a continuous process trying to collect the court costs. And I believe those are the court costs as they relate to the lab, as compared to there's other things that are factored in the cost of prosecution.
Just for clarity here, so I know that some of the follow-up information sent to you after last Wednesday, but some of that we have here about the cost of a jury for a day and such. But do we have any cumulative figures on what we've actually expended, other than just a profile of a single case? How much have we had to?
Jury trial wise or
Yes.
or prosecution wise?
Well, the first question I think dealt with specifically with the cost of the juries. There was also a question in regards to expert testimony. We know it's expensive, but what have we actually? Am I characterizing those correctly?
Well,
I'm trying to get
the expert testimony, I will say, we have not had a ton of experts coming in. So,
Right.
that cost hasn't been that great.
Okay.
Actually having an expert show up here in court. The part that I'm struggling with is how to factor in the fact that we have an expert. How does that make somebody plead guilty? I can tell you it makes a case stronger. But I mean, there are cases where defense attorneys are arguing with their clients that you should be pleading guilty and the client is still taking jury trial. And there's other cases where defense attorneys are saying, hey, we have a good shot at this, and the defendant wants to plead guilty. So
Cases like that, do they ever bring in like counter expertise, or is that not fun?
as it compares experts, it depends on what the topic is. Whether it be DNA or, we have other experts that do come in, defense experts.
So commissioners, if I may, I think one of the reasons for asking about the cost of the expert witness, the cost of sending the weapons to the lab, is that if we have a lab here, all of those costs go away.
Right.
So if from August of 2020, we spent $53,600 on those weapons, what does that, if we annualize that, what does that look like? What impact does that make to the salary figures that were shared? I think that was the point of the questions, was to really get a true sense of what is this really going to cost the county? Because it's not going to cost the county that $152,000. It's going to cost something less, whether it is a substantially less or a minor amount less. I think that's really what these questions were designed to hone in on.
Right.
I'd agree with that, but I think there needs to be stated too. There's a recognition too that those are the direct costs, and we've
Yes.
had a lot of discussion about indirect costs.
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
So can
yes.
we recognize that? But the direct costs are still relevant. So.
And I've tried to get as many answers as I can to the questions that you guys have.
Sean, would a municipality outside of Cumberland County be interested in this?
I would imagine, yes, especially the NIVE and technology.
Could we potentially charge them?
Yes. Yeah, and I think that would be our intention.
Okay, all right.
So let me rephrase the question I asked earlier. Do we have any type of projection on utilization of the service?
I do not have a projection other than looking at, for example, the number of cases that we had last year for people that were not to possess. If we were to take all of those weapons, which, and again, they're the cases that reached our office, there were 51 firearms. There may be an additional 76. Well, some of those numbers might merge together. Actually, the number I would be looking at would be the 76 firearms. Whether some of the departments that have things that are currently sitting in their evidence rooms, when we open up, that they try to get rid of some of the backlog they have, might have a little bit of an increase at the beginning.
Sure. Okay. All right. Remind me again, the grant is coming from,
It's federal ARPA money coming through
ARPA.
PCCD.
okay.
Yep.
And PCCD is not looking at this as an option on their own in any way, shape, or form, even given the bottlenecks with the state.
The money was earmarked specifically for reduction of firearms crimes. And
Okay.
I have some of the statistics. I forget how many millions of dollars they doled out. We were the only one that I saw putting it to this use.
What are the others do?
I know Harrisburg was investing in, it's called firearm detection.
Oh, right, yeah, the sonic.
Yeah.
acoustic.
Some of that.
It's every community stuff.
Some communities were using it to hire county detectives, just different purposes.
All right, that's fine, thanks. Other questions?
I don't have any. I believe I told you the last time I was supportive of this, and the material you produced for today just really backed up what you said last night or the last week, and made me feel very confident
Thank you.
in what is going on here.
Is the amount of the grant again?
I think a total of 1.5 million.
For 18 months, was it?
Two
20
years.
24 months.
24 months, with the majority of that money going towards the capital purchases. And then 14 months of that going towards the personnel. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes, 5 quarters, all of the last quarter of 2023 and 4 quarters of 2024.
Theory still, but I've heard enough that I support grant.
I guess I would prefer if we had a little bit more solid information on projections and such, and I'll tell you why. Sean, I understand what you're saying. Your perspective is you have to do what the DA's office of Cumberland County has to do, to be the best. And that's fine. It's understandable. We've got a broader charter here, and we just heard again today about how, we're going to need potentially to have a cache of emergency cash, basically just to handle what truly is an emergency situation where the urgency is pretty pronounced. And, we do have to prioritize in this job. We have to make some choices. I feel this is a great idea. I'm not sure it's developed enough to make me comfortable putting this on an equal setting with what we know is coming and coming fast at us. I think in a year or two, this might really prove its worth. But I have a lot of questions around it. And I know that we're really taking a chance if we're expecting the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to solve our problem for us on the mental health front. I guess given the choice, if we have extra cash, I'll put it that way, I would almost rather send it to the prison, the county prison, which is now being expected to serve as our biggest detox and biggest mental health provider in the county. Am I characterizing that incorrectly? So, the result of the failure of the Commonwealth, again, is to saddle us with that, and that's all paid for with county property taxes. We don't have the plethora of sources that others do. We get some grants. But I have to tell you, my perspective personally is shaped too by the fact that when I got here, the county had taken on an enormous number of multi-year obligations because of free money from grants, and without sufficient regard, in my opinion, to what would happen when those costs were fully to be borne by the county. And I don't know that we're there, but there's been a lot of talk over the last year about grants. And dependency on grants can get us into real trouble. This is very appealing. It's very appealing. And I think what it could do in terms of keeping Cumberland County #1, and more importantly than being #1, but addressing an evolving situation as a high growth county. It's very important. It's very appealing. I don't have any information on whether we can afford to do both right now. And I guess, what is the deadline on the grant?
The deadline on grant? Well, I mean, the award came in when,
The acceptance of the grant, maybe more precise.
I don't know if they put an acceptance on it. You know, when the grant came, when did we get the award letter? Was it in February?
In the beginning of February, I believe.
So, you know, we're a month.
But the deadline to accept, do we know?
I don't know if they put a deadline to accept on. Did
I would think it would be.
I would think so, but I'm not
this close,
aware
I'm sure there
of a
is.
particular date.
We'd get it.
I mean, I'm sure they're not going to sit there
Yeah.
holding this money for a significant period of time.
Would tabling this another week help, Gary, for you to?
Well,
You need,
I,
because I'm okay with doing it.
well, I don't know the answer to that, because I guess what I'm looking for is maybe something a little more solid in terms of at least projections. And, you know, we don't hold everybody to projections the same way a bank holds a business plan, you know, a company to a business plan. But it helps us make a decision on what's the investment we're making, what we can expect to see from it, if it's performing sufficiently, if it was timely or premature. And I haven't seen enough evidence to tell me that, going back to what was said last week, that the urgency is there, that this constitutes the type of emergency, to use that phrase, that's just my phrase, that we know we're facing right around the corner with a budget decision that we don't know how that's going to go. And, you know, we don't know what the follow-on from that decision is either. So,
Although I will say that this grant in and by itself for this year will not impact that situation, as all the costs in the first year are borne by the grant. Now, I totally understand, and as a citizen and a taxpayer of this county, totally understand the role and really the obligation that the three of you have in caretaking the rare resource of funds that this county has to use. You know, I've tried as best I can, and I may not be as articulate as I need to be, to express the serious concerns I have for the increase in violence in this county, and how valuable this particular tool will be to combat that violence here and make this, as I said at the top, this is a public safety. This is a public safety issue. You know, it's nice to be able to say that we have a lab and all of these things, but what's important with the lab and what's important with this that we're talking about is our ability to provide safety to the citizens here in the county. And, you know, I think some of the statistics lend themselves as to the numbers that we might see of firearms coming through the lab. Even if I just take, like I said, in 2022, 76 firearms were, people were encountered with firearms that were taken in by the police, that those people were without carrying a license. Now, there are crimes that are committed or firearms that are recovered where people are licensed, but they've used it illegally. So I think the numbers support that the lab is going to be useful, and that we are going to be able to utilize this lab not only to solve crimes, but potentially prevent crimes here in the county. And again, the support that the chiefs of police, they're a great group, but they don't always move quickly when you ask them. The response that I got from so many of the departments was very quick and very enthusiastic from their perspective as to the need for this lab. So it's kind of my closing argument to you as to why I believe, I recognize, and I've spoken with Annie Strite and others about the mental health crisis that we have in this county. So I know what you are struggling with. And unfortunately, there's a crossover sometimes with the mental health crisis and with firearms. They're not exclusive. And this would be yet another tool in that area that might be useful also.
I just don't, I ponder when I listen to Annie speak, and when I talk with her and I think about this problem, I think about what I think I know about the general fund balance and some money that the county is we have sitting around and plugging the hole completely. I think about that a lot. I don't think that rejecting a $1.5 million grant because of fear that we're gonna have to pay employees, 24 months from now, that's still not gonna save the mental health budget. I mean, it's just not. The hole in the mental health budget is it's just so big, and it's going to require a different kind of fix than trying to maneuver, right? Whatever the cost is for two employees. I think, Sean, one of the things that you haven't said during this conversation that appeals to me tremendously is that this could be a cost-saving measure. Because when you get the plea of guilty, because the evidence is so good, it saves county taxpayers dollars. And I don't know how you can project that out, right? To me, that's just common sense. You've said it. I know what happens in your realm. To me, it's just common sense that this is a taxpayer saving measure. Annie, I wish I could say, hey, if we don't take this grant, we're gonna have $2.5 million for you. And it's just not, the math's not there, right? It's just not there. Could we maneuver the $1.5 million over to mental health? But we can't. And, when we talk about the state coming in and saving us, I mean, obviously there's a reason why the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency is sending this money out. It's because the state is not saving us. They're not saving us in mental health right now, and they're not saving this issue. They're not saving us on a public safety issue.
AC, I don't expect you to know this right now. Is there funding in our public safety unit that could be?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Is there funding in our public safety budget that could be used for future cost of this for personnel? I don't expect you to know that.
Yeah, I would have to talk to a couple people about that. I'm certainly willing to look into that. Chances are slim, but
Yeah,
it's certainly an avenue to explore.
And we are meeting with our delegation on mental health this time next week.
One thing that just came to mind, and I don't have any of it in front of me, you may know better than I do. With the casino being built here in Cumberland County, at least I know over in Dauphin County, a certain portion of that was to go to public, it is not public services.
Not under our control.
There are grant opportunities through the Commonwealth. The local shares control the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Unlike the Dauphin County situation, very different places. It's not
Trying
to
to
say
think
we-
of things.
It's not to say we couldn't apply with that too.
And we are keeping our eyes open on any grant opportunities that are coming through the Commonwealth Finance Agency.
Do we know if casinos bring more guns into the vicinity? So
They do. There are certainly guns that are seized
casinos.
Okay. Well, I stated, I think I'd like to see more homework done on this. I just think we are maybe a bit premature, but I understand your enthusiasm for this, but I'm not able to support this right now. I think I could support it soon once we have more clarity, but I don't think I can support this now. So if they want to call a vote today, that's where I am. So
My preference is to table this for one more week. And I know in one more week, I will be able to make a up or down vote. But that would be my request.
is that a motion?
I will make a motion that we table discussion and approval of the gun violence investigation prosecution grant award and contract for the district attorney's office.
Also,
One of us can second that. I would really appreciate it, if Sean, whatever Commissioner Eichelberger needs, if we can get it for him, that would be great, because I don't understand. The level of data. So I would like to see it too. When it's produced, when we know what it is and when it's produced.
okay, so it's moved and seconded. Second, all in favor to keep it?
Aye.
It's tabled. Hopefully we won't need to bring you back and put you on seat again. Maybe we just get some data, but
I don't mind. Any opportunity to answer any questions. I'm
I'm
more.
just concerned that data doesn't exist yet. So there's a lot of maybe projection, guesswork involved, and that's just the nature of the beast. That's not a slam at anybody. So we have some very real things on the table in front of us.
Stacy, could you check on that public safety? Possible.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all, really appreciate it.
All right, so we have, those are our business items. Is there any additional business to come before us? If not, is there a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Stand adjourned.